The Zarkalians were a race bred for conquest. Towering figures of shimmering metal and flesh, they had spread their empire across dozens of galaxies, reducing countless worlds to ash. When their scouts discovered Earth, their high command barely flinched. It was just another primitive planet, another notch in their conquest. Earth's technology was laughably underdeveloped, and its people, fragile, short-lived, and untrained for interstellar warfare, would be crushed in hours. The Zarkalian War Council predicted the entire operation would be over by lunch. Commander Zeldar stood on flagship, watching the blue-green orb come into view. He let out a low hiss of satisfaction, a gesture of alien disdain. What a pathetic little rock, he muttered to his second-in-command. This will be easier than Eros 9. Deploy the strike teams. In minutes, sleek silver ships descended upon Earth's atmosphere, streaking through the sky like falling stars. Cities across the planet trembled as the invasion began. Their approach went largely unnoticed until the first explosions. By then, it was already too late. Plasma bolts from alien rifles obliterated buildings, their shields rendering Earth's projectiles useless. The Zarkalians marched through urban centers unchallenged, wiping out military forces with surgical precision. As human tanks exploded and jets crashed, the Zarkalians exchanged confident clicks of their mandibles. They don't even have energy weapons, one of the alien soldiers remarked, scorn dripping from his voice. This is a waste of our time. On the ground, chaos reigned. In the heart of Washington, humans scrambled for cover as the first wave of alien invaders tore through the streets. Soldiers, despite their courage, were slaughtered within minutes. Conventional weapons, the best mankind had to offer, had no effect on the alien armor, and their attempts at resistance only provided target practice for the invaders. In an underground war room, deep beneath the Pentagon, the mood was grim. Monitors displayed live feeds of the devastation unfolding across the globe, each one more catastrophic than the last. General Paul Hudson, a grizzled veteran with years of battlefield experience, slammed his fist onto the table. "We're being wiped out," he growled. "Everything we throw at them is like throwing pebbles at a tank." The other generals exchanged uneasy glances. Hudson was right. Earth's best defenses were falling apart. They were fighting an enemy that had centuries of experience, technology far beyond anything humanity had ever dreamed of. It was only a matter of time before the Zarkalians breached their last strongholds. "Sir," a voice came from the corner of the room. It was a young officer, face pale but resolute. "There is another option." Hudson turned, his brow furrowed. "What option?" "We've deployed every division we've got." The officer hesitated, then continued, "Not every division, sir. There's still Project Sentinel." The room fell silent. The name carried weight, an unspoken history, a legend. Hudson's eyes narrowed as he considered the suggestion. Project Sentinel was a last resort, a contingency plan so extreme that it had never been publicly acknowledged. But desperate times called for desperate measures. "You want to wake him?" Hudson asked, his voice a low growl. The officer nodded. "We have no choice. If the reports are accurate, we won't last another 12 hours. Hudson considered this, his jaw tight. Project Sentinel was not an ordinary military initiative. It was a classified program, a Black Ops project designed to train the ultimate soldier, a living weapon, forged through years of brutal conditioning, equipped with skills that no normal human could hope to match. He wasn't just a soldier. He was a force of nature, and his name was Duke. Hudson nodded grimly. "Do it." Meanwhile, aboard the Zarkalian flagship, Commander Zeldar watched the Earth broadcast with growing amusement. The humans were panicking, their leaders issuing desperate orders as if they still had a chance. It was pathetic. How long before total planetary domination? Zeldar asked, turning to his tactical officer. 6 hours, maybe less, the officer replied, clicking his mandibles in certainty. Zeldar chuckled. Pitiful creatures. They haven't even deployed their best defenses. They must know it's over, unbeknownst to the commander. Far below the surface of the earth, in a hidden bunker sealed away from the chaos, a lone figure stirred. Duke, a man who had been kept off the grid, isolated from the world he had been trained to protect, opened his eyes for the first time in years. He wasn't like the soldiers fighting and dying above. He was something else. Something the Zarkalians had never encountered. The war might have seemed over to the invaders, but it was just beginning. And this time, the fight wouldn't be so easy. The sun was low on the horizon, casting long shadows over the smoldering ruins of the city. Duke moved through the rubble with silent precision, his eyes scanning every corner, every movement. The air was thick with the smell of burnt concrete and the acrid scent of plasma fire. He knew they were watching him. Somewhere in the distance, the hum of alien drones cut through the silence. But Duke was no stranger to being hunted. He had lived his entire life preparing for moments like this. From his perch atop a collapsed building, he spotted them. 3 Zarkalian soldiers, sleek and monstrous in their armor, moving through the streets below. Their confidence was palpable. They didn't even bother to check for cover, believing the human resistance had already been crushed. But Duke was not like the others. He had no intention of dying today. With a quick, practiced motion, he set a trap. A small explosive, disguised among the debris, blinked faintly before fading into the landscape. Duke slid into position behind a broken wall, waiting. Patience was his greatest ally, and he had learned to let the enemy come to him. The Zarkalian soldiers marched into the trap without hesitation. As soon as they stepped into the blast radius, Duke detonated the charge. A searing burst of fire and shrapnel erupted beneath their feet, sending 2 of the soldiers sprawling, the third still standing. Looked confused for only a split second before a bullet from Duke's rifle pierced its skull, the armor no match for his well-placed shot. Without missing a beat, Duke moved. He descended from the building like a shadow, fluid and swift. One of the downed soldiers struggled to rise, reaching for its weapon, but Duke was already on it, driving a knife into the vulnerable joint between its armor plates. The alien let out a gurgling hiss before going limp. The third soldier, badly wounded but still alive, managed to crawl away, blood pouring from a gash in its side. It reached for a small device on its belt, a distress beacon. Duke's eyes narrowed. If that beacon activated, more aliens would be on him in seconds. In a single motion, he ripped the beacon from the soldier's grasp and crushed it beneath his boot. The alien hissed in frustration, its mandibles clicking furiously as it stared up at him. Duke locked eyes with the creature, his expression cold and unreadable. "You thought this would be easy," he muttered under his breath. "You're in for a surprise." He delivered a swift, final blow to the alien, ending its life with brutal efficiency. There was no time for hesitation. More would be coming. The Zarkalian commander, Zeldar, was watching from the command deck of his hovering warship, his mandibles twitching with frustration. The human soldier, this Duke, had become more than a nuisance. Reports from the ground indicated that entire squads had gone dark, their communications abruptly cut off. They had initially believed it was a malfunction, but now the truth was undeniable. One man, one human, was systematically dismantling his strike teams. "How is this possible?" Zeldar growled, pacing the deck. "He's just a primitive." His tactical officer clicked its mandibles thoughtfully. "He fights with tactics we have not encountered before, Commander. He does not engage directly. He sets traps, uses cover, strikes only when certain of a kill." Zeldar slammed his fist into the console. "Deploy more forces. Bring the drones. I want this Duke found and eliminated immediately." Back on the ground, Duke had moved deeper into the city, using the labyrinth of collapsed buildings and abandoned vehicles to stay hidden. He knew it wouldn't be long before the aliens responded in force. His eyes flicked to the horizon as he heard the unmistakable buzz of drones closing in. He took cover inside the remnants of a ruined office building, quickly assessing his surroundings. The drones were fast, their sensors nearly impossible to fool, but he had one advantage. He knew the terrain. He could hear them getting closer, the high-pitched whine of their engines growing louder. They were hunting him now. But Duke had already set his next trap. He had rigged a series of tripwires to small explosives hidden along the narrow corridors of the building. He crouched low behind a pile of rubble, waiting for the drones to enter. Moments later, the first drone zipped through the shattered windows, its cameras scanning the room. A split second later, it triggered the wire. The explosion rocked the building, sending debris and drone parts flying. 2 more drones hovered at the entrance, hesitating for a moment before entering cautiously. Duke didn't give them a chance. With lightning reflexes, he hurled an EMP grenade into the center of the room. A pulse of energy erupted, frying their circuits instantly. The drones dropped to the ground like stones. Duke allowed himself a moment to breathe, but only a moment. He knew this was far from over. The Zarkalians would keep coming. They had underestimated him, just like they had underestimated humanity. Duke crouched in the shadows of a ruined factory, his breathing steady, his mind laser-focused. The air was thick with the distant hum of alien warships, but his eyes were fixed on the streets below. The Zarkalians had escalated their hunt, sending their most elite soldiers to track him down. These weren't the ordinary foot soldiers he had faced before. These were war-hardened hunters, engineered for combat, equipped with cutting-edge technology. But Duke had faced worse. Through the cracked windows, he watched as a squad of heavily armored Zarkalian elites marched into the city, their movements coordinated and methodical. At the center of the formation stood a towering figure in dark, intricate armor, Commander Zeldar. The alien leader had come to finish what his soldiers could not, bringing the fight directly to Duke. Zeldar's mandibles clicked in irritation. He had lost too many troops already, and the human had embarrassed him in front of his entire fleet. He would not leave this planet without Duke's head. The city had fallen silent. No more civilian resistance, no more human soldiers in sight. The commander's target was clear. One man, a soldier who had proven more dangerous than an entire army. Duke watched Zeldar through the scope of his rifle. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him, but there was no fear in his chest. He had fought his whole life for this. In his mind, the battle was already in motion, each step calculated. The alien commander might have more soldiers, better weapons, and superior technology, but Duke had something the Zarkalians couldn't understand: human resilience, grit, and the ability to adapt. The first strike came fast. Duke fired a single shot, hitting one of Zeldar's lieutenants in the neck. The alien staggered and fell, its body hitting the ground before the others even had time to react. Chaos erupted. The elites immediately scattered, scanning the surroundings, their energy shields flickering to life. "Find him," Zeldar barked, his voice filled with venom. "Do not let him escape." But Duke had no intention of running. He moved swiftly through the building, setting off a chain of traps he had rigged earlier. Remote mines, explosive tripwires, and EMP grenades. One by one, the Zarkalian elites were caught in the blast, their advanced armor useless against the strategic precision of Duke's ambush. He was always one step ahead, using the terrain, using their own confusion against them. Zeldar, however, was no fool. He watched as his soldiers fell, his eyes narrowing with fury. This human was unlike any opponent he had faced before. Duke was a ghost, striking and disappearing with brutal efficiency. But the commander was patient, and he had one last ace up his sleeve. With a flick of his wrist, Zeldar activated a holographic display on his wrist device. Within seconds, the sky above the city darkened as a massive Zarkalian warship descended. Its engines roared like thunder, shaking the ground as it hovered above the battlefield. A powerful energy beam shot from its core, illuminating the entire area. Duke felt the heat of the beam scorch the air around him, and he barely managed to dive behind cover as the blast incinerated the spot he had been moments before. The warship's weapons were devastating, and now the odds had shifted dramatically. From his vantage point, Zeldar grinned. "You can't hide forever, human," he snarled. "I will burn this entire city to find you." Duke wiped sweat from his brow, his mind racing. He needed to find a way to neutralize the warship, but he was running out of time. The city had already suffered enough, and more destruction would only seal humanity's defeat. His eyes scanned the skyline, landing on a nearby power plant. If he could trigger a meltdown, moving quickly, Duke made his way toward the plant, dodging the relentless strikes from the alien warship above. He could feel the tremors of explosions behind him, but he didn't stop. When he reached the facility, he slipped inside, heading straight for the main control room. His hands moved over the controls with practiced ease, overriding the safety protocols and setting the reactor to overload. As he set the final timer, Duke stepped back, watching the system hum to life. It was a long shot, but if the explosion was large enough, it could take down the warship hovering overhead. He just needed to get out before everything went up in flames. Outside, Zeldhar's sensors detected the surge in energy and his grin faded. "What is he doing?" he hissed. The answer came too late. The ground beneath the city rumbled as the reactor reached critical mass. Duke sprinted for cover, barely making it out of the blast radius as the power plant exploded in a brilliant flash of light. The warship, caught in the shock wave, tilted violently, its engine sputtering before it crashed to the ground in a fiery wreck. Zeldhar watched in stunned silence, his entire invasion force obliterated in a single, calculated move. His mandibles twitched in rage as he realized he had lost. From the shadows, Duke emerged, battered but unbroken. He walked toward Zeldhar, his eyes cold, his face smeared with dirt and ash. The alien commander drew his weapon, but it was useless now. Duke was already there, knocking the weapon from his hands and pinning him to the ground. "You underestimated us," Duke growled. "That was your first mistake." With a swift motion, Duke delivered the final blow, ending the Zarkalian threat once and for all. The war was over. Humanity had won. But as Duke stood alone in the rubble, he knew this victory would not be the last. Somewhere in the stars, others would come. And when they did, humanity would be ready.